In this edition of I Escaped, a felon talks a prison nurse into helping him spring from jail.
Talk you out of your underwear, I'm telling you.
And a great train robber goes on the lam for over 3 decades.
My father never wanted to be the celebrity criminal, but journalists just kept coming left, right, and center and offering him money.
Around the world, over 9 million prisoners are behind bars. These are the stories of the few who dared to break out. Roane County Courthouse, Kingston, Tennessee, 2005. A busy court handling hundreds of cases, including the latest charges against 33-year-old George Hyatt, a violent career criminal. Hyatt is serving a 32-year sentence for assault and robbery and has already escaped custody 4 times.
George Hyatt was a thief, just to put it lightly. George was a drug addict and then graduated, if you might say, and on to armed robbery. And he was a thorn in the local law enforcement side.
And when Hyatt met 31-year-old prison nurse Jennifer Forsyth Taylor at Tiptonville State Penitentiary, her life took a dangerous turn.
George had become ill, and he went to the infirmary to be checked out. And he looked at her and he said he fell in love with her. He's got smooth talk. He's got smooth talk. He can talk you out of your underwear, I'm telling you.
Despite her being married with kids, it didn't take long for George to talk his way into Jennifer's heart.
They flirted around for a while, and then eventually he started going to the infirmary to have sex with her.
When their dangerous liaison was discovered, Jennifer was fired in disgrace. But love can be blind.
Jennifer left her children, her babies, and a husband for a man locked up in prison.
In May 2005, she married Hyatt inside the prison. 3 weeks later, he's back in court to face more robbery charges.
He had talked to Jennifer and told her, listen, I've already got 32 years. If they give me more than another 20-year sentence on top of that, then you gotta get me out of here. She said, yeah, I'm gonna get you out. No matter what it takes, I'm gonna get you out because I can't live without you.
The fear of living apart led the two to devise a deadly plan. After pleading guilty to the charge, George is marched out of the building toward a waiting prison van. Then Jennifer, leaping from a stolen SUV, pulls a gun on the guards.
Shoot him! Shoot him!
Firing, a bullet strikes Wayne Cotton Morgan in the stomach. Still shackled, Hyatt breaks away and jumps into the stolen vehicle. The second correctional officer, Larry Porky Harris, returns fire, emptying his gun. But the lovers race away. With a gunshot wound to the stomach, Officer Morgan lies bleeding on the asphalt.
It was a deadly and unconventional jailbreak, bold in its execution, brazen in its calculation.
3 Central. The radio call was to Kingston officers, you need to respond to the courthouse. There had been a shooting. You have an officer down. And when we got there, we seen the correctional van, saw Cotton laying on the ground. What I tell him then is, Cotton, we're going to get him. We'll catch him.
Tragically, while on the way to the hospital, Officer Wayne Cotton Morgan dies.
George masterminded the whole plan, and that there was indeed a very elaborate plan. You typically don't see that type of activity from someone with no criminal history. And in fact, just a few short months before, was a staff member working at the jail herself.
As police patrol the highways, members of George's family plead for the pair to turn themselves in.
If you listen, George, all I want to tell you is we love you. Please give me a call or give Mama a call. It's time for this to end. One innocent man done lost his life, and let's not make it two.
After stealing another car, The couple drive almost 300 miles to Erlanger, Kentucky, where they hole up in a hotel. A bullet from Officer Harris's gun has gone straight through Jennifer's thigh. Using her nurse's training, she works to stop the bleeding. It's not the marital bliss she had hoped for. Lying in agony beside her new groom, Jennifer holds on, knowing their precious honeymoon will be spent on the run. Erlanger, Kentucky, 2005. On the run and holed up in a hotel, George Hyatt and his new bride, Jennifer, have just spent their first night together. As a nurse, compassion was Jennifer's trade. As an accessory to escape, she's killed a corrections officer in cold blood and taken a bullet in the thigh. First thing the next morning, the Hyatts ditch their stolen car in favor of a cab. Suspecting nothing, driver Mike Wagers drives the couple to a cheap motel on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Believing a story that their IDs were lost in a car crash, Wagers checks the couple in under his own name.
About 8 o'clock that evening, I received a telephone call from one of my peers in Cincinnati saying that a cab driver had called and said that he believed that he had taken the Hyatts to Columbus, Ohio.
The U.S. Marshals and Columbus Police scramble a team of heavily armed officers.
I was certainly concerned for the safety of my deputy marshals and, of course, for the Columbus Police Department SWAT team. The murder weapon had not been discovered. I thought more likely than not it would end in violence.
The SWAT team surrounds the motel, cutting off all means of escape. Deputy U.S. Marshal Nicole Ralston heads to the reception desk.
I went inside the hotel and talked to the desk clerk. I wanted to verify that that room was registered to the cab driver's name, and it was.
We made sure that there were no motel guests in the adjoining rooms, and our perimeter personnel kept anybody from coming into our perimeter.
The Hyatts are oblivious to the SWAT team poised outside their door as team leader John Boland orders Nicole Ralston to call the room.
If George was to answer, she was to just act as though she was part of the motel staff. But if Jennifer was to answer, I wanted her to instruct Jennifer that the room was surrounded. There was absolutely nowhere that they could escape to.
I was actually surprised that somebody answered the phone, and it was a female. She said, "Hello," and I wanted to immediately find out whether these were the right people. So all I said was, "Jennifer?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Well, my name is Nikki Ralston. I'm with the United States Marshal Service." I said, "Your room is surrounded with law enforcement personnel. We don't want anybody else to get hurt, so I need to give you some instructions on what to do." She said, "Okay." I said, "George is there, right?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "You need to get George, and you guys need to surrender to the cops that are waiting for you outside."
Surprisingly, after a few moments, the door opened, and there was Jennifer.
"I need you to back up to the door. Keep coming, yes. Keep coming to the door."
She did that, and when she crossed the threshold of the door,
it was very strange. She wasn't even concerned much for her gunshot wound. It was just all about him. It's all about George.
Cornered in the room, the police don't believe that George will go down without a fight.
We captured George's attention. He answered when we called for him.
"Put your hands behind your head, sir. Now I need you to back up to the door."
We are very pleased to announce tonight that George and Jennifer Hyatt have been apprehended in Columbus, Ohio.
Actually, the guard that was killed, my brother liked him. He was really good to my brother. He was nice to my brother. He's cried over that. That's the main reason he turned himself in. He went ahead and gave up and without a fight because he felt bad. He didn't want that guard to get killed. Shoot him! He did not want that. It was a plan and went very, very wrong.
Pleading guilty to first-degree murder, George and Jennifer avoided the death penalty, but will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. But perhaps their biggest punishment, this nurse turned killer, will never see her husband again. Coming up, great train robber Ronald Biggs climbs out of prison into a life of celebrity. England, 1965, Britain's answer to Alcatraz, Wandsworth, the largest prison in the UK.
Wandsworth was a particularly Victorian, elderly, horrible, smelly, disgusting prison with particularly unpleasant warders.
Prisoners are in lockdown 23 hours a day, allowed only 1 hour of exercise in the yard, and even then under strict supervision.
Really tough, yeah. People have no idea. Wandsworth was one of the tough prisons.
Wandsworth is surrounded by sheer stone walls, 25 feet high. But in 1965, one man was determined to climb his way to freedom. Ronald Arthur Biggs had been incarcerated for his part in the Great Train Robbery. In the biggest heist England had ever seen, a 15-member gang made off with more than £2.5 million. Most was never recovered. Despite his minor role in the robbery, Biggs received the same sentence as the gang leaders, 30 years. Arriving at Wandsworth, Biggs initially had no intention of escape.
He thought, if I keep my head down and just do my time, I'll probably get some good remission for good behavior.
But his hopes were soon scuttled. An escape attempt by another gang member led to even tighter security measures for the Great Train Robbers. Biggs had been pushed too far and was driven to a desperate decision to take on the Wandsworth Wall. But he knew he couldn't do it alone.
There was a mate of Biggs's inside Wandsworth who was particularly shocked at the 30 years that Biggs had had and made it his avowed intent to get him out of Wandsworth.
May 1965, Paul Seaborn is released from prison. With part of Biggs' split from the Great Train Robbery, he buys and modifies a large furniture van.
They got a little spring in the roof where they could raise a section of the roof another 5 feet.
Seaborn would then toss 2 rope ladders over the wall into the exercise yard for Biggs and another inmate to climb their way to freedom. On July 8th, Seaborn gets word to Biggs to greenlight the breakout. At 3 p.m., the would-be escapees commence their exercise hour in E Yard. They anxiously and surreptitiously scan the wall for signs of movement. Then Biggs and fellow inmate Eric Flower sling their prison jackets over their shoulders, signaling they're ready to go.
Of course, nowadays, the prison security is a lot tighter. You wouldn't find prisoners who are high escape risks exercising in the same yard with other prisoners.
With only a 1-hour window to complete their plan, Seaborn and an accomplice in another car head toward the prison.
And they eventually pulled up alongside the wall of the E Yard and threw a rope ladder over the wall down the other side.
After a tension-packed wait, the escapees see the ladders and make a break for it. With 2 prison guards bearing down on them, their chances of escape are looking slim. But suddenly, a couple of lifers with nothing to lose tackle the guards to the ground.
2 of Biggs's mates were paid £500 each to get in the way of the 2 warders who were in the yard so that there was nobody climbing up the ladder to stop them escaping.
Biggs and Flower start the 21-foot climb.
It's very unsophisticated, very simple, and it relied on timing and the fact that there were only 2 warders who were in a position to alert the authorities as to what had happened.
2 other prisoners see an opportunity and also make a bid for freedom, scaling the ladders after Biggs and Flower. With alarm bells sounding and officers flooding into the yard, the 4 escapees reach the top of Wandsworth Wall. Seaborn's modified removal truck is waiting below. They make the 9-foot drop, and with pandemonium breaking out behind, they scramble down the back of the truck to a waiting getaway vehicle.
Well, the crews are fuming because it's made them look idiots. Whereas the prisoners are all dancing with joy, all shouting out to one another out the cell windows, "Well done, boys!" Everything, yeah, knowing full well it's getting up the prison officer's nose. I loved it.
But Biggs had a massive problem on his mind. Where do you go when you're the most wanted man in England? England, 1965. Having just broken out of London's Wandsworth prison, great train robber Ronnie Biggs and fellow escapee Eric Flower are hiding in a safe house. Biggs is the most wanted man in the country. His best bet is to flee England. But how?
Couldn't go through any airport or station with their photographs or put pictures in there because there was wanted pictures of them everywhere.
Their solution? A fishing boat. Once across the channel to France, both fugitives undergo plastic surgery to change their appearances.
It made a lot of sense at the time. I mean, they were even talking about removing their fingerprints.
Unrecognizable from mugshots, both fugitives head to Australia. Not a cheap option, and one which would drain the remainder of Biggs' loot.
I would say that the funding for his escape, which probably cost between £40,000 and £50,000 in total, including all the plastic surgery, all the flights, the funding for paying people to get him out of Wandsworth prison, for looking after him for several weeks in the immediate aftermath of the escape. All that cost around £40,000 to £50,000.
Biggs' entire family resettled in Melbourne as Ronnie resumed his career as a carpenter. But in 1969, Eric Flower is captured by Australian police, turning the heat up on Biggs.
Squads of detectives have had to be taken off local inquiries to take part in the hunt for the train robber. Detectives carry a dossier of photographs.
In 1970, with police closing in, Biggs was forced to flee to Rio, leaving his family behind. Once in Rio, Biggs tries to sell his story to a local newspaper, but is double-crossed. The paper alerts Scotland Yard, who pounce. The great train robber is in handcuffs again, but not for long.
Scotland Yard thought that they can, walk into Brazil, and they thought this is a banana republic. We can just walk in and wave our Scotland Yard badges and everyone's going to bow to us. What they didn't realize is that Brazil was under a very severe military dictatorship in those days. So the moment that it was announced that my father was arrested in Brazil, the Brazilian government stepped in and said, hold the phone, you can't do this.
Under Brazilian law, Biggs cannot be extradited to Britain. And with his new Brazilian girlfriend, Rambonda, now pregnant with Michael, he cannot be expelled. He's released, and the ever-resourceful Biggs makes ends meet by exploiting his newfound notoriety.
My father never wanted to be the celebrity criminal. It was never his aim to be in the public eye, but journalists just kept coming left, right, and center and offering him money.
But there's still a price on his head, and a group of bounty hunters are planning to cash in on it. On March 6, 1981, Biggs is kidnapped by soldier of fortune John Miller and his team of 4.
They pounced on him, roped him up, and kidnapped him. And got a light plane laid on where they flew him about 2,000 miles away, the other side of Brazil.
From the country's northern coast, the kidnappers sailed for Barbados to turn Ronnie over for extradition back to Britain. But in a case scrutinized by the world's media, the ever-resourceful Biggs exploits a legal technicality: his Brazilian son Michael, and his return to Brazil.
Before leaving Barbados, he told how he felt about squeezing through yet another legal loophole to freedom.
Completely, absolutely, 100% elated. But I was sort of thinking that lurking in the background there just might be the possibility of a return to dear old Blighted, and I was hoping that wouldn't happen.
And finally, he boarded a privately chartered jet on which a New York agent was offering reporters for a mere £25,000 a time the chance to ride alongside Biggs as he returned home. His son Michael, whose existence enabled Ronald Biggs to avoid extradition some years ago, was at the airport to greet him. Asked how he felt to be back in Brazil once more, 6 weeks after his kidnapping, Biggs replied, not surprisingly, squashed.
2 decades later, at the age of 72, strapped for cash and in ailing health, Ronald Biggs surprisingly decides to return to England.
Morning. I have here in my possession a warrant for your arrest for being unlawfully at large from Her Majesty's Prison, Wandsworth. Ronald Arthur Biggs, I'm now going to formally arrest you.
So Ronald Biggs is on the plane paid for by the newspaper, lands in Britain. He's arrested by the Scotland Yard detective with a warrant which was outstanding from his original escape, and he ended up in Belmarsh Prison, which is the prison with the highest security rating in London.
Ronnie Biggs was not one of London underworld's most successful criminals, but he was one of the most colorful characters. After more than 3 decades on the run, Ronald Biggs served 8 years behind bars before being released in August 2009 on compassionate grounds.